All right. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining our webinar today. Today, we're going to be talking about Media Backbone Navigator X and fast and easy asset management for sports applications. There are a few topics we're going to go over today. First, I'm going to give a general overview of Navigator X and some of the high-level features of the system. Then we're going to talk about content acquisition and using remote workflows using the cloud. Then we'll get into sports metadata and how to get metadata associated with your assets. We'll talk about NLE workflows for quick turnaround. And lastly, taking your content and distributing that content. All right. So I'm going to jump into Navigator X here. So first thing, just some general information about Navigator X. Navigator X is our media asset management and workflow orchestration solution here at Sony. It is HTML5 based, so it's platform agnostic. Your end users can access it from a Mac, a PC, Linux, even a tablet or touch device if they want to access it. So completely platform agnostic. We're also file agnostic. You can register any type of file you want into the system. Specifically for media files, we'll generate proxies for preview in the browser, but you can register any sort of file into the system. So I'm going to jump into our first topic here on content acquisition. I'm going to go ahead and log into the system here. And obviously the first part of getting your MAM set up is getting your content into your system. And so there are a number of ways you can get content into Navigator X, and also a number of ingest endpoints that you can pull content in from. So first, when it comes to ingest, Navigator X is able to ingest content from a variety of different types of storage locations. Navigator X can ingest from local storage, NAS storage, cloud storage. We can ingest from an archive if you have an existing archive library. We can ingest from an FTP location. So you have a wide variety of storage pools that you're able to use for getting your content into the system. And the easiest way to get content into our system is using what we call our asset importer. And so from our asset importer, this will allow you to browse all of the various storage locations that I just talked to you about. From there, you can browse those locations, find the files that you need, and then on the right-hand side here, you've got the ability to specify metadata schemas that will apply to those assets that you're bringing in. And I'll speak to metadata schemas in just a moment here. You're able to fill out some common metadata info. So if you're bringing in clips from the same event or same game, you can associate certain metadata with it. If I go ahead and select my sports schema here, I would be able to go ahead and select, fields that I've set up here for maybe home teams, away teams, or maybe the stadium that we played in. So you can go ahead and select those common metadata fields. And once you've got your assets selected in the asset importer, you've got your metadata populated. At that point, you can ingest into the system. And from there, you've got a wide variety of options for workflows that you want to execute with your content. So directly from ingest, you can obviously do a transcode of your video content to create a proxy that's going to be viewable within Navigator X. We'll create a thumbnail of that content, but you can also do things like automatically archive your content directly on ingest. You can directly go to a distribution or do some sort of a transcode to another format of your content. You've got a wide variety of options there. One of the workflows that I want to show you guys today is actually using the cloud for remote ingest. So in sports, obviously there's a use case for being on the road, being at an away game or an event, and not being at your production facility to directly access the network that your media asset management system is on. We have a integration between Navigator X and our C Media Cloud platform. Our C Media Cloud platform is a completely cloud-based platform that can host video. They have a number of tools for video collaboration in the cloud. They can generate proxies in the cloud. There's a lot of very good features for doing working with your content in the cloud outside of your network infrastructure. So with the integration between NavigatorX and our C Media Cloud platform, you can utilize the cloud to ingest content into your system without being on your network. So I'm going to briefly jump over to C here. So this is our C Media Cloud platform. And what you're seeing here is this is the video repository in the cloud. And directly from the cloud, I can upload content to this workspace. And back in NavigatorX, that content will automatically get ingested into the system. So you see here, I've got a few clips that have come over. And I'll just jump into the settings here to show you. You've got a number of options when it comes to this ability to sync content from the cloud. So when you set up your C account here in the, and connect it to NavigatorX, you have a number of options for which part of the assets you want to sync. So you don't have to sync down the master assets if you're uploading very high-res files that may take up a lot of space. You don't need to sync all those files. You have options here for just syncing your master, your proxy, or your thumbnails. So here, there's a few settings. One is I've linked my C Media account here, and then using the selective sync, I can select exactly which workspaces I want to browse. So in this case, I'm just going to close this for speed. In this case, I've got one workspace already selected here. I've got my metadata schema automatically selected. And then from here, I have the option to specify whether I want to sync a master, a proxy, or a thumbnail. I'm just syncing the proxies and the thumbnails for speed, but the masters can be requested at any point in time. So as soon as And so these are the three workspaces that I have set up on C. You can see those same folders here. As soon as that content makes its way into C, it's going to automatically sync down into NavigatorX. So when you're thinking about your remote workflows, if you have a scenario where you're on the road at a game, you need to get content back to your production facility for your editors to begin editing with. The producers that are on the road can upload content directly to that C workspace. And as soon as that content hits C, it'll get synced back to your facility on premise. And your editors on-prem can either work with those proxies that have been synced, or if you've chosen to sync your masters, they can work with the master assets. Additionally, with our own Sony cameras have the ability to create proxies on the fly, and using either Wi-Fi or an LTE dongle can actually upload those proxies directly from the camera straight to our C Media Cloud platform. So in that scenario, if you're shooting with one of our Sony cameras that has the ability to create its own proxies, you could actually have those proxies uploading straight to the cloud and available for your editors to edit with before they even make it back from that game or make it back from the stadium. You can actually be getting those proxies in real time during the game or the event, and your editors can be back at your facility already working on an edit even before the game is completed and those cameras have made their way back. So you've got a number of different ways to get content into the system. Again, if you have that content on local storage or NAS storage or cloud storage, you can do a direct ingest into the MAM. You've also got the ability to utilize the cloud, whether it be through our C Media Cloud platform and the syncing ability that I just walked you through, or you can also use an S3 bucket as an ingest endpoint. So you can utilize the cloud as an ingest endpoint for remote workflows. When it comes to metadata, you can associate metadata with your assets a number of ways. We do support XML sidecar files. We also support EVS sidecar files. So if you're getting EVS files directly from your trucks, you can bring in those assets with those EVS files, and all of that metadata will get brought into NavX. As far as metadata goes, I'll jump into the settings here real quick. It's extremely easy to create custom metadata schemas for your content. Within NavigatorX, you have the ability to create as many metadata schemas as you need with as many types of fields as you need. So you can very quickly add a new metadata schema, and from here you can go in and add new fields to that schema. You don't have to define the schema at the very beginning. You can work on your metadata schema and evolve it over time. As far as the types of fields, you've got a wide variety of fields that you can implement in your schemas. You can do string fields, date fields, Boolean fields. You can do a drop-down field with the enumeration option here. You also have the ability to require certain fields or not require those fields. So if you want to make sure that you're getting a certain level of metadata on ingest, you can require those fields. You can also create child dependencies. So potentially you may have one drop-down field that you want to then, if a certain option is selected, you want another metadata field to populate. So an example would be if you're covering multiple sports, your initial drop-down may be the actual sport drop-down where you specify the sport that the clips are related to. And then once that sport has been selected, you may want an additional drop-down to drop down with the options of the teams or stadiums for that specific sport. So instead of showing just a very large drop-down of all sports or all the teams and locations for all sports, you can use the child dependencies to kind of narrow that down as you're building your metadata for the assets. Once you've brought your assets in and associated that metadata schema, you'll see the metadata schema on the right-hand side here when you click on any of the clips. This metadata panel carries throughout most of the interface. So you'll see it here while I'm in the asset viewer screen. If I double click and go into, you'll see it in the asset manager screen. If I double click it and go into the asset viewer screen here, it'll stay there. To edit your metadata is very easy. You've got just got to move this WebEx screen here. You've got this edit button here. And you can very quickly edit it inline and save those fields directly from the metadata panel here. Along with the custom metadata schemas that you define that are related to your content, we do have some metadata that's automatically brought in with all your assets. You do get some general metadata revolving around asset types, time code, duration, things like that. Additionally, any technical metadata that is associated with your assets is also going to be brought in and associated. So for video files, you'll get video and audio information. For image files, you'll get that EXIF metadata. All of that technical information will be brought in. And that's important because as you go to search for your assets, you're going to want as many data points as possible to search against. And using our Elasticsearch engine, you are able to utilize both custom metadata fields, those general fields that I spoke about, and any technical information to search for your content. Additionally, we have two other ways that you can associate metadata with your content. And the first one you see here is I have this Events tab. And what Events does is Events allows you to add metadata to specific portions of your clips. So a good example is if you have a 20-minute coach or player press conference and you really want to remember a single minute of that, well, you can come into the player and you could create a subclip, and the subclip would actually create a new clip of that piece that you want to keep. But you may not want to duplicate the clip. You may not want to create a whole new clip out of it. What you can do is set an in and out point here and create a new event. And what that event will do is that event is now going to add metadata to that specific portion in time. So I'm just going to call this drive here. And it's just going to add that event here. And so now that becomes a searchable piece of metadata. So I can add an event title, I can add an event type. Obviously, it's going to maintain that in and out point. I can add a note if I wanted to. And now, because that's a searchable piece of metadata, now when I go to search for my clips, this clip may be lost in, the thousands of clips that I have in my system. But if I remember that there was a specific portion of that clip that I want to get back to, I can search for that. And once I jump into that clip and I go to that event note, it's going to take me right to that in and out point. So it makes it very easy to get back to those pieces of your content that you're going to use most often. So if you've got, highlights, but you know that there's a celebration on the end of it that you're probably going to use in a melt, time and time again, you can go ahead and add those event notes to actually add some metadata to just those portions of your clips that are most important. We also support subtitles within Navigator X. And so with these subtitles, if you are able to import, if you have subtitles coming from your content and you're able to import those subtitles, they will not only can you display them on the videos for playback, but you also have the ability, just like with the events tab, those subtitles will show up as events within Navigator X. So you can click through those and get right to those in and out points. But again, these are all searchable pieces of metadata. So while I'm searching for my content, in this case, I searched for Navigator X. Because Navigator X is inside of these closed captions, it's returned the video for me, and I can quickly jump to those portions of my content that have those search results. And I can even filter my subtitle events here down by search, and now it's just showing me the pieces that relate to my search. So it makes it very easy, again, to find those specific portions of your content. If you have TV partners that are doing shoulder programming, or you're doing your own closed captioning, associating those closed caption files with your content is going to make it that much easier for you to find those pieces of your content in the future. With any of your assets, Navigator X we do have our own transcoder built into the core software. So anytime you ingest any of your assets, we are going to create a proxy of your assets. And that proxy obviously is viewable directly within the browser here. One thing you'll notice about the browser, and it may be a little difficult to see via the webinar, but this is actually frame accurate playback. So you can actually scrub this frame by frame directly within the browser. You can also use your arrow keys to move frame by frame. All of your normal NLE shortcuts work within the browser here. So JKL, as I'm doing right now, to scrub your timeline. I and O for setting your in and out points. But again, anytime you bring in any content, we are going to generate that proxy for you for playback. And you can also work with that proxy to edit with. So I'm going to show in a second how you can get content out of Navigator X into your NLEs, but that proxy can also be used for editing. And when you set up the system, you have full control over what you want the quality level that you want those proxies to be. So you have full control over the resolution, the bit rate. So if you wanted to have a smaller proxy for faster playback or quick file transfers, you could do, a small 640 by 360, few megabit proxy file. If you wanted something a little high res to edit with and maybe to do some color grading with, you could do a 1080 proxy or what have you with maybe, a 6 to 8 megabit bit rate, something a little bit higher quality that you can edit with. That's completely up to you. You also can mix and match. So if you have certain content that you want higher quality proxies for, you can do that. Maybe others on your ingest workflow, you set them to a normal proxy because you know that you're going to be okay working with the master content. So, for example, if you're bringing in content from GoPros or maybe some drones that have that lower bit rate that you can edit directly within your editors with no problem, maybe you generate smaller proxies for those. But maybe for the content that you're shooting at much higher resolutions, your 100 megabit full res content, maybe those in 4K, maybe those you want to do a 1080 proxy of for editing. You have the ability to specify those, and you can work with those. With these in and out points in the player, you're able to do a couple of things. One, as I said before, you can create those events. You can also subclip. So if you subclip, it'll actually create a new asset within Navigator X. So again, if you had that 20-minute long press conference and maybe you want to make a new clip out of maybe 2 minutes of it, you can create that subclip, and now that will be its own clip instead of just being contained within that larger piece. You can also distribute those subclips. So if you have that 20-minute press conference inside of your MAM, and your social media team wants to tweet out just a minute clip of it, they can go into Navigator X, set that in and out point themselves, and very quickly distribute a subclip to whatever distribution point you define within the system. And then from there, they can upload that to social, and you can specify exactly what you want that transcode to be on distribution. So if you want to create a nice H.264 for social, you can do that, and it makes it very easy for those teams to just go into your system, find the clips that they need to find, and distribute those subclips. You also obviously have the ability to manage archives within Navigator X. So for archive, we support obviously our own Sony optical disc archive. We also support LTO libraries via several HSMs that we integrate with. We also support archiving to the cloud now using our C Media Cloud platform. So when you're archiving with Navigator X, you can archive and retrieve full clips, but you can also archive and do partial archives and retrievals. So in this case, if you've archived, an hour-long broadcast record of your game, but maybe you only need to get back a minute of it, you can go within Navigator X, find that point within your clip, set that in and out point, and now just do a partial retrieval of that content. And instead of pulling back that full hour from your archive library, you can just pull back that minute that you're going to edit with. And once you are ready to edit, there's a few ways that we work. We can get assets out to your NLEs. We support all the major NLEs on the market. The easiest and simplest way to export is actually just selecting your clips, or you can actually select an entire bin of clips if you wanted to. You can select your clips and just come up to one of the contextual menus. You'll see these contextual menus throughout Navigator X. You can come right here to export for NLE, and you'll get a number of options here. First, you have the option to specify the destination that you want to export your content to. You have the option to specify a mode that you want to work with your content in. So in this case, you're seeing copy and link. A copy will actually create a physical copy of that essence in a location that you specify. A link is just going to create a shortcut asset to the original content. So if you're on your network, you're okay working across the network, and maybe you're working with some lower bitrate files, you don't want to necessarily create duplicates on another machine, you can just use a link, and your NLE will link directly to that asset on your NAS storage, for example. If you know you're going to take maybe your editing machine offline, maybe you have a laptop, you're going to go on the road, you can use copy to actually copy that to a destination that you can take with you. And then lastly, you've got the option to specify whether you want to work with your master, your proxy, or maybe you want to export both. So again, this is great for one of those scenarios where if you're shooting in, say, 4K or maybe even 6 or 8K, if you're shooting on some of the higher resolution cameras, those higher resolution formats are very good at choking NLE systems that aren't extremely maxed out when it comes to specs. So maybe you want to just work with the proxy, do your edit, and then once you've completed that edit, you can marry up your masters and just do a conform at the very end. So you have the option to work with either. And again, because you can specify the quality of those proxies, you've got full control over, what quality proxy you want to edit with there. Also within Navigator X, we support what we call storyboarding. And so with storyboards allow you to create a rough timeline directly from within the NavigatorX interface of your content. So this is great in a scenario where maybe you have shooters that are on the road and your editors are actually back at your facility, or maybe you have production assistants or interns or seasonal college assistants that are working on maybe piecing together your content before it actually gets to one of your editors. They can go directly from within NavigatorX. They can search for their clips, set those in and out points, and then drop them on a timeline here. And once you've got that timeline laid out, now you can actually export an EDL or an edit decision list right from within NavigatorX. So again, we support all the major NLEs on the market. You've got Adobe Premiere, the ability to export a Final Cut or Media Composer EDL file. But additionally, most of the other pieces of software on the market support EDL formats from one of these three NLEs. So for example, if you're doing color grading in DaVinci Resolve, DaVinci Resolve will actually support an EDL list from any of these three. So you can actually use any of these formats. Same thing for most of the color suites. They will support EDLs from the three major NLEs. So not only will NavigatorX export this EDL, but it's also going to kick out the assets for you. And then when you import that EDL into your NLE, it's going to link up those assets, lay them on the timeline in the exact order that you had them here, with those in and out points already set for you. So again, if you have a workflow where you need somebody to be setting up a rough cut before your editors actually make it back from a game or an event, they can go ahead and do that directly within NavigatorX without the need to actually go into an NLE. Lastly, we also have support for Adobe Premiere and Adobe After Effects, whereby we actually have a panel integration built directly for those applications. So in that case, you can actually open up the NavigatorX Asset Manager interface directly from within those applications, and you can do all of your normal content operations directly from within those applications. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Premiere project here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the NavigatorX extension here. And just like any other panel within Premiere, you can drag this around. You can drop it anywhere in the Premiere interface. If you wanted to drop it on a separate screen, you can do that as well. Just like inputting in some of the info here. Once you've input these options once, the only thing you need to do anytime you open up the panel is log in with your normal username and password credentials. And that's just so that any permissions that you've set for content also carry through to Premiere. Obviously, if you set permissions for people to see only certain content, you don't want them to jump into the NLE and all of a sudden be able to see everything. So they'll log into the panel, just as you see here. And then from here, they can do pretty much everything they would be able to do from the NavigatorX interface directly from within Adobe Premiere or Adobe After Effects. So you can browse for your assets. You can view and edit any of your metadata here on the right-hand side. You can do all of your simple searches or advanced searches here at the top. I can browse my bins to browse for my content. I can also upload back into the system directly from the panel. So once I've completed my project, if I want to upload that back into the system, I can do that directly from within the panel. And just like when you're in the NavigatorX interface, you do have the option to import a link or a copy. So again, you have that ability if you want to just work across maybe your network and your network bandwidth and link directly to the asset on your NAS storage, you can do that. Or if you want to copy it to a local destination that you're going to take offline, you can do that as well. So this integration is something that we're looking to also build into the other major NLEs. The Avid Media Composer is going to be the next one on our roadmap, so that'll be coming very soon. The last thing I wanted to talk about quickly is distributing your content. So we've gone through ingesting your content, we've gone through getting metadata associated with your assets, getting your assets out to your NLE. But once you've got your content, how can you distribute it to the different places that you need to get it out to? Well, within Navigator X, again, because it's a workflow orchestration tool, you have the ability to create workflows, distribution workflows to get your content out to different locations. So when you create your distribution workflows, you have the ability to specify both distribution locations. So whether you want to distribute your content to local storage, NAS storage, you want to distribute it to cloud storage, you can do that. You can specify those distribution endpoints, but also on distribution, you can specify how you want the file to be transcoded. So for example, if you're creating a distribution endpoint that you're going to use for social, maybe you want to create some form of an H.264 for profile that you're going to use for that. Or maybe you've got a lower bitrate profile that you want to use just for Instagram posts or what have you. You can specify those distribution formats. But what I really want to show you guys is how we can use our C Media Cloud platform to now distribute our content outside of our network infrastructure. So again, within C has a couple of features that are really great for distributing content. The first thing is because C is completely cloud-based, it doesn't connect directly with your on-premise network. So there's no need to give access to anyone inside of your network if they need to access C. So you have a few options here. One is you can create users with their own credentials that can log into C, and anytime you actually do a distribution workflow from NavX to C, they'll actually get an email notification to let them know that new content is available. So a good scenario for that would be, maybe for your media asset management system, you only want your production team to have access to that. Maybe you want to give your PR or your marketing team only access to C. What you can do is using those distribution workflows, you can take your content that's on premise, use that distribution workflow to now push that content up to a C workspace. And that's going to push that content up to that C workspace. Those users will get a notification that they have access to that content. And then from there, they can go in, they can review it, they can download that content. They can, like I said, C has some great features for review and approval, collaboration in the cloud, so they can do some annotation on the videos if they want to, add some comments, some things like that. There's also what we call a media box, and C has a feature whereby you can take your content that's inside of C and create what they call a media box. And you'll see here, I'll show you some of the options. These media boxes allow you to send out a branded link to anyone you specify, and that link, once they click on it, will allow them to view that content. If you give them permission to, they'll be able to download that content. But again, it's allowing you to distribute your content outside of your network. So if I were to create a media box, they would get a link. Once they clicked on that link, it would take them to a page just like this one. You can fully brand this page. And then from there, they can view that content. You'll see I've given them the option to download that content. So again, completely taking that content and extending it outside of your network. The great thing about having the integration between Navigator X and our C Media Cloud platform is that now you can take all of your content that's on premise, so all of your content that's either on local storage, NAS storage, or even that you have sitting on an ODA cartridge or an LTO tape somewhere in your archive library. NavX can pull that content back from archive or pull that content from your NAS storage, automatically push it up to C, and automatically create that media box directly from within the Navigator X interface. And so that will allow you to now take your on-premise content and push that to folks outside of your organization for them to get that content. So a good scenario for that is if you're a sports organization and you have one of the networks requesting footage for some shoulder programming that they're doing, you can very quickly go in, instead of giving them access into your MAM or even giving them access into your C workspace, you can just go ahead, curate some clips, create that media box directly from within Navigator X, and they'll get an email with the branded page that then they can go and review that content and download that content. So again, using the cloud, we can now use the cloud as a way to get content into your system from outside of your normal network infrastructure, but you can also use it as a distribution endpoint. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions here. There's a question area on there's a question area in the webinar. And so I'll take questions from there if you have them. One question we have here was Final Cut Pro 10, 7, or both. So when it comes to the EDL exports, it is a Final Cut 7 and up compatible EDL. So you can actually use that EDL file with both. And obviously with the assets themselves, whatever format you decide to distribute those assets in, you can transcode those into for editing. So as far as Final Cut goes, both are supported. So if there's no other questions, I'd like to thank you all for jumping on. We'll be doing another webinar next month on cloud and on-premise hybrid scenarios. So a little bit of what we talked about here today, just a little bit more in depth on how you can use the cloud for your workflows. Thank you again for joining. I hope this was informative for your sports workflows. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us or visit the Sony website for more information on Navigator X. Thank you.